Something I also want to talk about, I don't want to like read too much into one result in a waterfall of an entire season. Anyone beating Iga Swiatek on clay is a big deal because she just doesn't lose on clay that often. Like she's her on that surface is the most dominant thing in women's tennis as far as player, surface, matchup, the whole thing. I win a bunch of French Opens. I've won 3 by now. Iga, obviously, not me. I didn't make the second week. Rybakina now has a 4-2 record against Swiatek, beats her on clay in Stuttgart. Is this a real conversation piece? Is this matchup a real problem for Iga, regardless of surface? She was playing her well at Rome last year too. Like this is a weird kind of outlier in this like season of Iga dominance. Am I making too much of this?
I'm glad you used the highly technical word weird, because that's what it is. And I feel like it kind of is an encapsulation of her career. This is a generational player, right? I mean, let's just stop now and she could retire tomorrow. She's in the Hall of Fame. This is probably the most accomplished. Yeah, Iga is. Yeah. But just when it looks like she's absolutely ready to like grab the sport by the collar, there's some mystifying losses. I mean, remember, she went to Australia. This was going to be her year. And then she lost to a player who was outside the top 50. And she gets on these rolling streaks, but then we see some really strange losses. I mean, this is a loss to Rybakina is nothing to cry about. But
yeah, Rybakina, it was her third win of the year already.
Yeah, exactly.
Fifth final.
But I don't know what to make. So on the surface, you say, yeah, that's a bit of a strange result, and that's against sort of one of your rivals. On the surface, you're supposed to own at an event. You're supposed to own, and a big deal was made about who was going to get the car. I don't know if you remember. Iga says, I'll make more garage space, and Rybakina says, I don't even have a driver's license. So we know that we know the automobile awaiting the winner wasn't necessarily the prime motivation. No, I don't know. I mean, you're sort of ready to roll your eyes about Iga and say she's not match tough, and then she goes and like rolls a tournament, and then you're ready to say this player could win 3 majors a year. How is it that so often she's not making the latter rounds of majors? And it's a very strange sort of, in a weird way. I don't know if I've seen this in a long time for a player of her caliber. It actually might be a segue to Mugu if we talk about it. But it's a player of her caliber. There are a lot of strange sort of rhythmic losses where you never would think she was vulnerable, and she is. And then all of a sudden you think she's vulnerable and she runs a table and goes 2 months without losing a match. So I don't know how much we're going to, we're all going to laugh about this the second Saturday in June when she wins another French Open. And remember when all the haters were worried about results in a Saturday tournament in Germany. But it's a strange result. And I think Rybakina is kind of sneaky tough, right? She doesn't give you a lot. There's not a ton of body language. She's not an incendiary quote. There's not a great backstory we all know of, but she just kind of is sneaky effective and sneaky match tough. And she seems to be in full health for the first time in a long time. Circle that result. It might be a big nothing, but that also shows me a little bit of vulnerability. And for Rybakina to come back and win the final, I think is significant too. We were talking about Casper Ruud, and you're sort of an emotional, some emotional gauge after a big win. I give Rybakina a lot of credit for coming back 24 hours later and winning the trophy. It's a strange result, and circle it. It might be meaningless in 6 weeks, and it might also be something really significant.
Weird. So hear me out here.
Yeah, go.
We do have to reset on the heels. You mentioned it earlier, big three, Serena. The best player in the world, we're not entitled to that person dominating every week. Like, we're talking about Iga Swiatek not being matched. She's won a couple of 1000s this year, like already. And she smothers people when she's playing well. I think there are certain types of matchups for her that are more difficult. I think of Rafa like 08 through 11, where Del Potro in 09 in the US Open semifinals, because he can throw haymakers and go through Rafa, he beat him 2-2-2 in the semis. Right? Cilic, he would take some losses sometimes when people could create certain pace mechanisms. Not when he's playing great, not when he's at peak form. he can beat Federer in the finals of Wimbledon. Like there's just, but when it's not entirely comfortable, there was a way to play Rafa. Like I felt more comfortable in that matchup, not because I was going to win, but because what I had to do to have a chance to win was so clear, right? I could not extend points. It was not something that was ever going to work. It was just going to be a slower, more painful death. I had to go with blunt force trauma. I had to serve and volley more often than I wanted to or that I was comfortable with. I had to do it sometimes on the second serve. If I had 2 feet under a forehand, I'm not trying to find a spot, in someone's arsenal, up, down, cross, line. I am literally just unloading blindly and with a shitload of pace, right? Like that's what I had to do against Rafa, and it rarely worked. And on clay, it was like, there's no chance. But on a fast court, that's like you could affect him negatively. And it wasn't as if, and conversely, when I played Roger, it was like there are all these like little, he hits that short chip. It's like, you get a read on it? Can I chip and come in on that one or not? Like, can I come over it? Do I need to reset? There were decisions to be made, but they weren't super clear, right? On the second serve return against Rafa, I'm going to try to run around, get some space, and I'm just going to torch it, but I have time, right? His second serve isn't the biggest in the world, whereas with Roger, he can move it around the box. It was just a tougher matchup for me because it wasn't as clear what I had to do. And I lost every way. I tried all of it. And it's simply matchups, right? Because Iga Swiatek loses to Rybakina, and it is seemingly a weird matchup. Rybakina's serve can go through the court. She can create pace. One of her best shots is forehand cross court to Iga's forehand, which happens to be the shot that she doesn't like defending on as much, right? So all of these little things, I just think they lead to a weird outlier matchup that seems to have now been proven with their match last year in Rome, and then with this one now that it might work on Iga's favorite surface. Now, we got to get outdoors, right? That this is not Roland Garros on powdery, slippery clay where movement is more exposed. This is when you're indoors, it's a lower bounce. It always is. The ball still sounds big. For someone who is a ball striker, which Rybakina is a ball striker, this is a good set of circumstances. So I just think we need to kind of watch that matchup because it might be one of the only ones that Iga is super bothered by all the time. Similar with, if Sabalenka's firing in all cylinders, it's streaky, it's through the court. It's just interesting, but I think this makes, and you're not cheering for people, I just think this makes the rest of the clay court season on the women's side more interesting.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and I think Rybakina in a weird way poses a bigger threat to Iga. Some of it is X's and O's, and some of it is just temperamental. I mean, also, who beat Serena Williams in her last match at Roland Garros? Check me on this. I'm pretty sure it was Rybakina. I mean, she can play on clay. This is the Wimbledon champion. She can play on this. And I think, selfishly, from where we sit, tennis is a lot better when we have wavering, when we have these sinuous results and when we have rivalries. I just keep an eye on that result because you're right. It's a different surface. It's indoors. It's a weird surface. It's not necessarily so predictive of French clay, but this was a bit of a strange result given context. Remember, Rybakina has, and I don't know if it's, we probably shouldn't speculate. She's had some post-COVID problems. I mean, it's nice to see her healthy and get through a tournament, which isn't always the case.